This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. Hello and welcome to this week's episode, where my guest is Perrine Bulgheroni, a renowned farmer who, along with Charles Herve-Gruyer, co-authored the Living with the Earth series of books and co-founded the famous Bec Hellouin, an ecoculture farm in northern France. We talk about growing produce, closed-loop farming, how food growing helps capture carbon, and how to manage your natural environment for maximum benefits for people, wildlife and ecosystems.
This book, which in French is called Vivre avec la terre and Living with the Earth in English, is kind of a Bible. A lot of people say so. I'm not too sure, but at least what I can say, it's a very big book. In total, there are 3 volumes. That amounts for more than 1,000 pages. Can you imagine? It's more than 5 kilos, if I may say. And it's the story of our farm, the farm that we've created in Normandy in 2003, called La Ferme du Bec Hellouin, the Bec Hellouin farm, in which we've tried and implement different techniques, but mostly we were highly inspired by permaculture that we found out about in 2008. So the farm is a 20-hectare farm, and we mainly grew vegetables, fruits. We used to produce apple cider vinegar, apple juice. We had also some poultry for eggs and meat, and some sheep also. So the book is whatever we've learned all over this more than 20 years adventure on this farm, based on permaculture principles, but not only. There are a lot of inspirations coming from nature, a lot of techniques coming from all over the world that we've implemented at the farm. And basically, this book will teach you the way to implement either a self-sufficiency family farm or a professional farm.
So I think it's correct to say that what you do, you term as ecoculture. And I wondered if you could explain that term.
Yeah, ecoculture, it's the sum of techniques that are inspired by nature. You know, permaculture is a toolbox, thanks to which you're going to create a real ecosystem. So the farm is, in fact, an ecosystem. And I would even say that a farm is a mosaic of different small ecosystems interacting with each other. But when it comes to techniques, we try and mimic nature. So ecoculture means we try and implement all the rules and principles according nature rules its own interaction, and we copy and paste them into the farm. For example, the farm, just like any other old-time farm, has ponds, has edges, hays, raised beds, lots of birds, lots of biodiversity, because we do invite this biodiversity in the production system. But we also try and implement the basic of what nature teaches us in terms of production to increase the yields on the farm itself.
So it seems to me that your farm sits obviously in the wider environment, but it also seems as though you keep your cultivated areas to definitely a smaller amount of area than the entire 20 hectares. Is that correct to say? Are you cultivating a small part of it?
Yes, indeed, because the total of the farm is 20 hectares, as you mentioned. But in fact, among those 20 hectares, we have 12.5 hectares in woods. Obviously, we don't grow anything on those except for wood by itself. All along the journey, we've been implementing vegetable production on something like 7 hectares at the beginning. And the more we implemented and understood about permaculture, the less we saw, because with permaculture, you get smarter, you get more efficient, and on a small scale, you manage to make as many vegetables as on a bigger plot of land. So at the end of the journey, we've ended to something like 2.5 hectares cultivated, really.
As a model of growing versus traditional agriculture, it does seem to take up a lot less space. Can you talk maybe about the inputs in terms of labour and also the output versus traditional agriculture? I know you've had a lot of studies done on the farm. What were your overall findings?
Yes, indeed. Actually, we've led a study from 2010 to 2015 with the French INRAE, which is the Institute for Agronomy here in France. And for 5 years, we've been counting whatever we've been doing on this farm, i.e. the inputs and the outputs. So we had to time all the workload we had, whatever we were doing, either we were weeding, either we were sowing or harvesting. And at the end of the day, the study revealed, and it didn't come really as a surprise to us, but still a little bit. The study revealed that on 1/10 of an hectare, which is basically what's recommended when you start growing vegetables here in France with a tractor, then on 1/10 of the surface, we managed to do exactly the same benefits and almost to grow the same amount of vegetables. Of course, we won't grow exactly the same type of vegetables, but because we are on very small scale, we have to do everything by hand. And therefore, where the hand can be highly meticulous, highly precise, the tractor or the motorization wouldn't be able to do it. That's our advantage with regard to the modern equipments. Therefore, we managed to densify as much as possible all the crops to get better yields. And since we do everything by hand on a daily basis, we are in the garden, which means that we walk, we see, we analyze what's going on. Therefore, I think productivity is higher than when you're on your tractor. And of course, on a daily basis, you cannot check on every single plant that grows in your field. I think that does explain the results and the success in terms of productivity. And to give you a hint, at the time we published this study, very important study that came kind of like a bomb here in France in the vegetable growers' little world. We could measure that within a year, one person by herself, and maybe she would need a little bit of extra work in summertime for harvesting and so on. But anyway, one person over a year with something like 1,200 hours of work could make an average revenue of 52,000 euros, which is a lot.
That's incredible. Because obviously what you're doing is you're not just feeding yourselves and and your family. I guess you're selling produce from the land. And that brings me on to another question, which is about what you term the flow of organic matter. And obviously you're taking out, you need to be putting back. Could you just talk about that very briefly?
One says in permaculture, everything that comes from the soil goes back to the soil. And that's one principle we shall all have in mind and keep in mind, because that's a basic of the fertility of our soils. First of all, you cover your soil. If you have a look at Mother Nature, you will never find any centimeters of bare soil. If you have bare soil in nature, because I don't know, an animal has scratched at this place or whatever, Mother Nature will cover it. You will have either grass or moss or nettles, maybe. Anything is going to grow just to protect the soil. And that's one of the basic of this type of agriculture. You shall mimic Mother Nature, which is always cover your soil. That's how you're going to keep the moisture. That's how you're going to have organic matter that will decompose into your soil, well, on your soil, and then after, thanks to all our friends who work for us in the soil, it will decompose into the soil. You're going to keep the good bacteria, because if your soil is exposed to the sun rays, the UVs will burn basically the bacteria, the good fungi that you have in the soil, in the top soil, let's say, within the 5 first centimeters. And then you're going to lose all those free workers somehow. So you shall cover the soil for all those reasons. And another reason with our goal, with our aim, is to cover the soil to avoid all whatever we are going to call in French bad herbs, which are weeds, to regrow, because you only want your vegetables to grow, basically. So if you cover the soil, somehow it's going to make it hard for the weeds to grow and come and cover your own crops. So, that's very basic, but just by covering your soil, you manage to achieve all those goals. And then it's easy to understand that you're going to build fertility while covering your soil. So you're going to cover with whatever you have. That might be leaves, that might be shredded wood, that might be manure that comes from your animals or from the neighbor's horses. Anything you're going to be able to add to cover the soil, to protect it somehow, will help. And at the beginning of the farm, we knew nothing about agriculture and we were very naive. So we thought we had a good soil because this farm, which was not a farm actually when we took over, it was just pastures used for cows. And we thought, since it's been pastures for 30 years or even more, far more than that, we thought that the soil was good and highly rich in nutrients, in nitrogen, and so on. But we were wrong, because what we didn't know is that at the heart of the valley, the soil is usually very thin. You've got a very thin layer of soil. Therefore, even though the thin layer is good, if you find stones, sands, calcarea that we used to have in your soil, then the rooting systems of your vegetables cannot develop. That's a big, big problem. That used to be a big issue for us. That's why we've started, just like a lot of traditions used to do, we started to pile up organic matter, mostly manure. I have to say, we had easy access to horse manure, which is the best manure. And thanks to that, we started to pile up manure, mixed sometimes with all the weeds we had. We had a lot of nettles, for example, a lot of camphor that we used to pile up this organic matter. And we used to grow vegetables on those raised beds, as we could call them. It's not exactly lasagna, it's rather raised beds. And step by step, year after year, we've managed to literally create some soil. And at some point, we were having that joke that we were rather soil producers than vegetables producers. And we know that for vegetables, they are a very demanding crop compared to cereals like wheat or maize or whatever. But vegetables, they request a lot of nutrients and a lot of nitrogen, and their cycle of life is very short. So you have to answer to their demand, but on a very short period of time. Therefore, there's no other option but to bring nitrogen in. And to do that, either you can add organic matter that comes from elsewhere, just like our horse manure coming from the neighbors, or you can use whatever you have on the farm or in the garden to do some compost, again, to cover with whatever will decompose in the soil, thanks to the good fungi and the good microorganism you've protected and you have in your soil, basically.
And I'm guessing that feeds into how your farm contributes to capturing carbon as well. I think that's something you also looked into deeply.
Exactly. Because we had another study on the farm saying that we are far better on this farm than the objective of the 4 per 1,000. That's an objective that was set by the INRAE, and it's a European objective now, in order to capture 4 units of carbon per 1,000 of soil, if I may put it very, very simply. And with this type of techniques and agriculture type of farming, we are far more resilient and far more efficient than we are in a regular type of farming. So it has been shown that adding some organic matter into your soil or on your soil, because you don't dig into your soil, you put the organic matter on the soil, and the worms and the bacteria, the good fungi, and all the other insects and small animals that work into your soil will do the job. So when you pile up this type of matter, not only you add organic matter in your soil, then you capture carbon. And also, which is very important nowadays, you keep the moisture in the soil, you keep the water in the soil, because even though we are in Normandy, where the rainfalls are still nowadays quite sufficient, well, we tend to have some droughts, but it's still quite okay compared to other areas of the world. Still, we are very, very careful of the water. And the best way to keep the single drop of water that comes in your system is to add some organic matter in your soil. In permaculture, I don't know who said, I've read something like this somewhere in a book, but I don't recall who wrote that. It says that the very single drop of water that comes in your system as a permaculture, your main job is to keep it the longer possible in your system, which means in your soil or in a pond or wherever. Therefore, if you want to keep the water as long as possible, what are you going to do? You're going to dig ponds, but living ponds, just not holes that keeps the water. You're going to add organic matter into your soil. You're going to plant trees and hedges, and you're going to cover your soil. And all this, thanks to all those good options, those good techniques, then at some point you're going to be far more resilient when it comes to water. Either you have the water as a drought or as a flood, it's exactly the same. You have to manage your water. And the best thing you can do for that purpose is to design properly your system in advance. Before you implement it, you have to design it according to permaculture principles. And basically, you design it as an ecosystem to make it the most efficient possible for you as a human being, because the workload in the farming field is quite heavy. So you have to make it more gentle for yourself, and you have to spend the less energy possible and to keep the water as much as possible.
So I presume I have volume 1 of your book. Mm-hmm. And it's really comprehensive, and it goes into great detail about starting from the ground up. And it seems as if you get that key thing right, then everything else comes off of that. What do you actually cover in volumes 2 and 3?
So volume 2, which will be released in English spring of 2024, is very detailed with regards to all vegetables. So you have tables with all the vegetables that you can grow, with all technical details. You learn how to make raised beds. You learn how to make flat beds. You learn also how to create forest gardens, which is a very important technique in agroforestry and specifically declined in permaculture. So the second volume is far more technical, and the third one, which will follow very soon after the second one, really teaches you how to create your own farm from scratch. Again, either you want to do it in your own garden for family self-sufficiency, or you want to be serious about it and go professional. The third volume will explain everything about the way to start and the way to succeed.
I absolutely can't wait till those books are out. I'm really looking forward to those, because the first one's just, as you say, it is a Bible. It's fantastic. Is there anything, apart from getting the books, are there any other places that people can find out about your work, or can they actually come and visit the farm?
Well, no, because the farm is not open to the public anymore, but there are a lot of videos on the internet, on YouTube and so on, because all over those more than 20 years, we had a lot of media coming and visit and so on. But nowadays, I spend most of my time helping young project holders, most of the time, setting their own farms. So I travel all around Europe to help setting this type of farms. So I spend a lot of time doing that. And Charles keeps on leading a few studies at the farm, but there's no real production anymore, because we thought our time is better spent helping others and spreading the movement now.
Thank you very much to Perrine. I'm just off to daydream over farms for sale in France. And as always, thanks to you for listening. You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All Podcast.